Former President Donald Trump is facing new accusations. This time, it is from the Washington Post, which broke the story last week that a $10 million cash withdrawal drove a secret probe by the Justice Department into whether the former president took money from Egypt. That would be illegal. Two of the Post's top investigative reporters, Aaron Davis and Carol D. Leonig, report that 5 days before Donald Trump was inaugurated in January 2017, a manager at a bank branch in Cairo received a letter linked to the Egyptian intel service. It asked the bank to, quote, kindly withdraw nearly $10 million, all in cash. According to the Post, bank employees were scurrying around, placing bundles of $100 bills into large bags weighing 200 pounds and making up a sizable share of Egypt's reserve of U.S. currency.
Now, the reporters say that this was a sign that Egyptian leader Abdel Fattah el-Sisi sought to give Trump $10 million to boost his 2016 presidential campaign. In 2019, then Attorney General Bill Barr raised doubts about whether there was sufficient evidence to continue looking into the matter, and the case was dropped. President Trump has publicly responded to the Post saying this is nothing more than, quote, fake news. So is this fake news or not is the question. Trump, said the Trump campaign says there was no evidence of this whatsoever. And I read the entire Washington Post story, and there, in fact, is no evidence showing that this money was given to Trump. They think the investigators seem to think it was because Trump gave his own campaign $10 million, and their theory is that he was expecting to receive this money from the Egyptians, and he has obviously been friendlier to this Egyptian leader than Barack Obama was, his predecessor. However, there was not sufficient evidence, in Bill Barr's view, to continue the investigation, and he said, according to the Washington Post article, that, Merrick Garland can restart the investigation if they think there's something to it. It's interesting that the Biden DOJ never did take up that matter, and it is now, according to the Washington Post, it is now past the statute of limitations for such a illegal campaign violation, if one had occurred.
Right. And so Barr directed Jesse Liu, who was the Trump-appointed U.S. attorney in D.C., to personally examine the intelligence and evaluate if further investigation is warranted. So these are Trump-appointed people making decisions within the Justice Department as to whether or not to investigate Trump further. Barr instructed the FBI Director Christopher Wray to impose adult supervision, is how it's put, on FBI agents that Barr described as hell-bent on pursuing Trump's records. So there were some agents on the FBI that, for whatever reason, very clearly saw a need to investigate Donald Trump. And they were directed by their leadership to not do it and put on watch to ensure that they wouldn't investigate it. That's why the investigation didn't happen then in 2017 when Trump first became president and when this had happened recently. And who knows where it was buried and why the FBI under a Biden presidency didn't pick up this investigative work if there were agents at the FBI who believed it was worth investigating. And so now we're depending on the Washington Post to get into this. And so I think that whatever probe is going on, everyone has their eyes on this, because even if he can't be criminally prosecuted right now, I think a lot of people are curious if something illegal happened here and what ties to the foreign government of Egypt Trump has, in addition to his family members' ties with Saudi Arabia. But I think a direct tie of Sisi and Trump in this way is very interesting. Cartoonish level corruption if they're putting bags of cash that weigh 200 pounds in Egypt to give to the president, to give to the president's campaign as maybe repayment for something Sisi did. Who knows? But it reeks of the Bob Menendez gold bars in Egypt. The corruption happening here is really just cartoonish, Robbie.
Well, right. I mean, the alleged corruption in the Menendez case, the money is in they found it in his possession, right? The problem here is that this money was gathered up, was put in bags, but they don't know for what purpose it was used. They don't know if it went to Trump, and the investigators did not turn up that evidence. And, it is kind of telling, right, that, I guess you can argue it both ways. That Team Biden did not restart this investigation. Obviously, if they were sitting on some really good evidence that, like, Bill Barr had hushed up that Trump had taken this money, you would have expected them to pursue it. Maybe they were just so busy with January 6th stuff that they thought was more open and shut. They didn't handle this, or maybe there was actually nothing to it. Many people alleged much closer overlap involvement between Russia and the Trump campaign. The sensational claims that were made about that then was largely, not entirely, but largely not substantiated by substantial investigation. That yes, there was attempted influence peddling or influencing of the election on Russia's part, but that these efforts were not as vast as they were stated by the media, and that the cooperation on the Trump end was really not exactly there. So is it another situation like that where they're trying to, they being the media, are trying to manifest some corrupt connection when the actual investigators were unable to turn up one? Or did Trump motivated investigators deliberately look away from solid evidence of that was somehow then not revisited by the incredibly hostile Biden team when they came in? It's possible. It's possible the Biden people were not competent or were focused elsewhere, and that's why it was never pursued. So I don't know. But this Washington Post article, which is very interesting, does not demonstrate any new or compelling evidence that Trump was the beneficiary of these millions of dollars, which is not to say it's not impossible or that evidence does not exist, just that it has not been surfaced.
Right. Very interesting that Trump, who always is talking about the deep state and the deep state's plot against him, when a lot of people initially coined the phrase deep state, how they were using it was to describe the intelligence community and the part of the American government whose activities is not overseen by the public or Congress in a meaningful way that would make sense in a democracy. But what happens when Donald Trump gets to appoint people to direct the deep state's activities? He can say, don't investigate that. He can have people who are loyal to him who decide the deep state is actually going to be used to cover up potential crimes of the president. So who knows if these FBI agents that were put on adult supervision were scared into not saying anything, scared into not pursuing this lead. And when the case was closed, they were too afraid to speak up under a Joe Biden presidency. Who knows if they're still in their positions at the FBI? But I think the American people are paying attention to this because we all know very well the FBI will sit on leads of very dangerous people. A lot of mass shooters and people who have done extreme acts of violence in our society are people the FBI was aware were threats. So we know that they sit on things that are real problems and don't investigate them. And I think at this point, a lot of people are curious as to what happened here, because it's a little bit of a hypocritical move to say, I criticize the deep state, we're going to drain the swamp, get rid of the deep state, and then have members of the intelligence community potentially not investigate financial crimes that allegedly were committed, that they were tipped off to, that they were put in the direction of. I think we just want the FBI to follow all of these leads until the end and see where the evidence goes. And if this was just Bill Barr using his position of power to say, don't investigate that, I think a lot of people are going to have more questions about the deep state, thanks to Trump, not just because of his speeches, but potentially because of the actions of the deep state under his power.
We will continue to look into this matter. More Rising right after this.